Good morning, I'm David Burns, Chairman of the English Business Council. I'm delighted to welcome John Roper this morning of Uniper Global Commodities, but more importantly, he's the Chairman of the Petroleum Club in Dubai. John, what's happening with the oil market these days?
Good morning, David. Well, it's nice to be on your show. Thank you very much for the invitation. The reality in the oil markets at the moment is that there is a massive amount of oil being produced, too much oil for the world to take. There was an oversupply of oil to start with. The coronavirus has hugely dampened demand. A lot of estimates look at sort of 30 million barrels a day of demand destruction. And so the oil that is being produced at the moment, has absolutely nowhere to go. For the last month, people have been buying crude still and putting it in storages, wherever they can around the world, whether it's tank farms on lands or whether it's floating storage through crude carriers. So just about every spare bit of storage is now taken up, and we describe the nearing of a full storage situation as tank tops. So tanks are completely full, and so if producers are going to continue producing, they're finding it more and more difficult to find buyers, and so prices are having to come down.
Isn't it just logical? People just
say, take it.
Isn't it just logical that you just stop pumping? But that's it. You just close the things down. And I know, having worked on oil fields, that that's not always possible. But surely there must be a way of just reducing to almost nil the requirement.
Physically, it's very difficult in some oil and gas reservoirs to stop producing without damaging the reservoir for future potential startups. So whilst you can, in certain reservoirs, slow the production, so turn the taps down to produce less oil, it's very, very difficult to turn these off completely. And in the US, you'll have heard a lot about the oil shale revolution in the US. The geology is such that the wells are fracked, so they're stimulated to produce as quickly as they can because the reservoir is in a very, very tight reservoir. And so there's not a lot of experience of these wells actually being closed in with a view to opening up again. So it is possible that in these oil shale reservoirs, if you did close the wells in, that they actually might not come back on. And so, companies that have, borrowed lots of money, have committed a lot of resources to the development of these assets, are really loath to do that. But I think the reality is, at some point, you are going to see this happening because at the moment, there is going to be too much oil. And because there is so much oil in storage, this massive oversupply is going to hang around for a significant amount of time.
How much time are we looking at? Because this seems to me that it could have a long-term impact, and I'm not talking of months or weeks, I'm talking of years.
Well, look, the OPEC Plus group of producers have reached an agreement that at the beginning of May, they will reduce production by approximately 10 million barrels, 9.7 million barrels a day. But if you're looking at a demand destruction in the world of about 30 million barrels a day, that's not really going to make much of a dent. And the world looked to OPEC to reduce production. But the reality is OPEC nearly always does this when it's required. It's been very good at managing these oversupply situations to try and support prices. But we're in a situation right now that is so dramatic that if all of the producers in the world don't support OPEC, then OPEC cutting is not going to make any difference. You're going to see a lot of oil flowing until Q4 of this year. The first oil that will be put onto the market, if production cuts do come into being, will be taken out of storage, because that oil, don't forget, will have been bought at fairly low prices. And so if there's the opportunity to sell this oil on at higher prices, it's a tremendous windfall profit for those people that have that storage. I think the reality of the situation is, do we have long-term oil demand destruction such that it never comes back? And that's an unknown right now.
Is there any truth in the rumor, or I heard somewhere, that in certain circumstances they were pumping oil back into the ground?
There will be some reservoirs that crude production can be diverted to. There might be old fields that no longer have a productive capacity, but can still receive oil. And I would think it's unlikely in the majority of cases, to be quite honest.
Are we going to see a dramatic decrease in the price of petrol at the pumps as a result of this? Because that's what people will think.
Well, these things always seem to be disconnected, don't they? I mean, if you think about Europe, the largest part of the price of a gallon or a litre of oil is tax, by a huge amount. It's about 80%, I think, or 70% of the price. And so it's not always, well, and this depends, of course, how long this oil lasts. You know, if prices are low and going lower for months and months and months and months, then you will see that translated into the price of a gallon of oil. But you know, prices are fairly bearish at the moment. I mean, I think you might have heard last week that in the US prices went from barely positive to one day for WTI, for West Texas Intermediate, to minus $40 a barrel, indicating that those producers actually paid to have their oil taken away. Now, that was a little bit of an anomaly, and it was based mainly around something called an exchange traded fund in US oil, where paper oil is sold on a monthly basis. And it just so happens that the contracts expired or were expiring, and because there was no storage for people who had these paper contracts to physically take delivery of the oil, there was nowhere for the oil to go. And to be quite honest, these exchange traded funds aren't designed for people to take physical delivery. They're normally bits of paper that are sold on and then sold on and then sold on.
Yeah.
So has a bit of an unknown.
Has the restrictions that the local government have placed on companies affected your company at all? Have you had to downsize, or are you a pretty slim operation anyway? Uniper is predominantly a utility and commodity trading company. So we have a very large power generation business in Europe and Russia and the UK, and so there is still the demand for energy. And whilst we see energy demand down, certainly, it's within the risk limits that we have. And so we still have a positive outlook, and our first quarter results will be fairly robust given the circumstances. And there are lots of other reasons as well. But at the moment, I mean, touch wood, the company is in a sound position. Great. Let's talk about the Petroleum Club, because I miss my first Sunday in the month's meetings. I assume that we're going to get back to those as soon as we can.
Well, look, as with everybody else, back in February, as congregations of people were being cancelled at various events around the world, we decided to be just careful for the members. and to postpone the networking luncheons. We will clearly look to try and put those back in place. I mean, Dubai government law doesn't allow us at the moment, congregations of more than 10, and this might just be a Ramadan issue, but congregations of more than 10 are not allowed. One subject that I think would be of interest to us all, and it would be great to elicit your support in this, would be to set up a virtual lunch. Through Zoom, we could all cook ourselves a meal of some sort and have our water or beverage of choice, and start maybe having some virtual petroleum lunches so that we all keep together and continue to talk about the issues relevant for us in the oil and gas business.
I think that's a brilliant idea. I think it's a brilliant idea, and I think it's something that we should actually get our head round. I like the idea of having the opportunity to have lunch, have the beverage of my choice, and then just walk upstairs and go to bed.
Well, the idea is that they're not excessive lunches.
No, certainly not.
We're lucky in the Petroleum Club. We have a really diverse membership. Anybody that has an interest in the energy space is welcome if they're in a position of seniority, and it's useful to have that caveat because it does mean that the discussions that take place, which are always held under the Chatham House rule, mean that we can have meaningful discussions about not just global issues, but very local issues as well. And it's something, David, you've been a member for a long time, and it's been fantastic to have your support. But the club's been going for over 30 years now, in one form or another. And it's great that it still goes, and it only goes because members want it to go and continue in this way, which is super.
Yeah, I think it's a great initiative. I've had a number of these Zoom calls with people, and they're all of the same mind. The chairman's network in London, who hold meetings locally, had a virtual meeting 2 weeks ago and managed to get people in from 3 other continents to that meeting, and they've never been able to do that before. Even though they've had Zoom and the opportunity, they've never used it, and now this is going to become something that I think will be the norm, and it will change business. But I suppose in your business, face-to-face meetings aren't as important as getting the paperwork and the negotiations done. So is Zoom something that you do on a regular basis, or will have to do now? Has it changed your business?
I mean, yes, it has. I mean, we use Microsoft Teams in the company, which is a very, very powerful tool, not just for having conference calls, but the distribution of information and data as well. And we actually, as a corporation, we practiced working at home a good few weeks before it looked as if that was the way we were going to have to go. Because, I mean, a part of our business is trading. And of course, you have to make sure that if traders are at home, that all the systems work, they have all the IT equipment that they need, that the compliance regulation is in place for working from home and working out of hours possibly, which in the normal course of events would take place on a trading floor. So as a company, yes, we've been very happy with the way that this distance relationship is working. I think origination and business development will suffer because a lot of business development is very personal. If you know people, then this type of video conference call is fine because you have a history together. But if you're making new counterparts, then that might be a slower process. And I think at some point we'll have to just see how that gets managed. But at the moment, this is the new normal of how we're conducting our daily business.
I don't think it'll be long, and I'm sure the technology is being developed now, where these conversations can be translated in real time into any language. And I think that's going to make a huge difference to what you do when you can actually sit down in Dubai and talk to somebody in English, which is translated into Chinese and Mexican, and you can have the same conversation at the same time?
The first thing that comes to mind is that that's probably an exciting idea, but golly, you'd want to know the translation that was being received at the other end is what you intended it to be.
Yeah, I don't think Google might crack that at the moment. I've tried Google. It doesn't always come out the right way. John, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for joining us. And we will pursue this Zoom Petroleum Club luncheon. I'll send you some thoughts and we'll take it from there. Thank you so much.
Right. Well, David, thanks very much indeed. And, you know, much success to the English Business Council, because it's a great initiative. You know, it's missing from the United Kingdom's basket of business councils, and it's good to see that you've developed it and running it. And thanks for supporting the Petroleum Club so well.